Okay, so these are the top 5 questions associated with ketamine assisted psychotherapy. These are the top 5 questions that I would expect potential clients to have about the whole process. And so I've made a video to kind of answer some of the more common questions that either I've heard or that I would like to hear as part of the process. The first key question, of course, is going to be, what is the ketamine experience like? Essentially what happens, so you're mailed the ketamine in a process I go over in a different clip. You're mailed the ketamine. During a session, you will take the lozenge when you're ready, you'll put it in your mouth, you'll swish, usually about 12 to 15 minutes. And generally speaking, for most clients, this is the worst experience because it feels kind of weird in your mouth, and you're swishing it, and towards the end, most people are looking at their watch ready for it to be over. It's not exactly a pleasant experience. But then after that 12 to 15 minutes, you spit it into a cup. You will put a sleep mask on. You will put on headphones. And then you will sit back and just take a very inward journey. You'll listen to a playlist, and the different pieces of music will kind of shape your experience. It will shape your process for you. Essentially what happens is your body becomes relaxed. You become a bit dissociated. It's like you're floating above. And from this distance, from floating above, your right brain just sort of takes over. And so you can notice things, you can see the big picture, right? We get so focused on particular goals that we often lose sight of the big picture. We learn as children that I have to do this before I can get love, before I can feel connected, before I can feel worthy. And this kind of gives you an opportunity to show, no, you can get that love, you can get that connection now, and that is okay, right? So in essence, it can help remind you about what's important. And it can show you things that you might not be able to see without having that big picture. It's like taking a helicopter and rising above, and you can kind of notice the patterns. A good analogy that I've used before is that it's almost like traveling. If you travel with the intention of learning about yourself, learning about a new place, but learning about how you're currently doing things, sometimes going to a different country, seeing how they do things differently, and then looking back on yourself, right? So you might notice certain things that are missing from back home if you have that intention of learning and growing. That's kind of why the intention is so important. You can take ketamine, you can take psilocybin, MDMA, have a great time, but not really learn that much. But if you come in with the intention of, I'm going to learn about myself, my struggles, what's important to me, that can be true for you. Then after about an hour, you kind of come back, right? You feel back to yourself, back to normal. You take the sleep mask off, you take the headphones off, and you come back to the computer, and basically we talk about your journey, what you learned, what you experienced. Second question, how does it help? I used this analogy before. In fact, one of the reasons for making these videos is so that I can just do this analogy once, this metaphor once, and then just share it with my clients. But imagine you're in the Serengeti, and there is a tribe, right? There are these hunter-gatherer tribes. They go out, they hunt wildebeest. And sometimes, as part of that process, they bring a medicine man whose basic job is to get a bunch of sticks, throw them in the air, and wherever they fall, wherever they land, that is essentially where the herd is going. So the guy will look at where the sticks are and say, the herd is this way. This is where we're headed. And what the anthropologists who've studied this group found that when they include this medicine man, as odd as it is, their success rate essentially doubles from when they don't have this medicine man. And they couldn't figure out why, and they studied and they studied. Finally, they found that when they have this guy, they're just not debating as much, right? There's just, when you don't have the medicine man, there's debates, you have different people with different egos, and one saying this way and the other saying it's this way, and sometimes they backtrack. But when they have this guide, when they have this direction, this compass point, they just get started. Now, even if they're completely wrong, even if they are way off, just getting started can have a profound effect. And that's how it works for a lot of people here at home. They have kind of an idea of where they want, but there's so much uncertainty, there's anxiety, there's depression, and just, not sure what to do. And sometimes what this medicine will do is it will provide, okay, here's what to do. Here's the direction to go. Is it always completely accurate? Not necessarily. But sometimes just starting to move is itself a big deal, right? Sometimes the mantra that comes up, the mantras are usually very, very basic, but they're very, very powerful. It's almost as if the universe is telling you something. In some cases, for people like who are trying to quit smoking, sometimes the message is just, smoking's kind of gross. And of course, smoking is kind of gross. But the idea is that it's like the universe telling you this. So the next time someone's offering you a cigarette, that thought comes in. Yeah, smoking's kind of gross. And it's then just easier to just say no and abstain. I worked with an actor, and their big mantra was, no one gives an F, right? And that's very, very impactful, right? That, kind of allows you to do that audition. And when you go to the audition, do something different, do something unique. You know why? Because no one gives an F. Then as a therapist, my job is twofold. First, my job is oftentimes to pump the brakes. So if I'm dealing with an actor, their instinct might just be, let's quit my day job and go full-time into acting. And I might say, well, let's wait until you get the big gig, right? But oftentimes my job is to then push the accelerator. So my job is then to remind the person about that mantra. If that person's going on an audition or going on a date, my job might be to say, remember that mantra, no one gives an F. You're free, right? Be yourself. The other big benefit is that the ketamine can very much encourage self-care. Tons of studies have shown that basic self-care, meditation, moving your body can have profound impacts on your mental health. And it's important to realize that, the ketamine, you don't want to fetishize it. You don't want to just assume that you're just going to take this medicine, whether it's ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, and everything is going to suddenly be great. Sometimes the way these substances work is an indirect pathway. So if you can focus the ketamine on, can I meditate a little bit each day? Can I schedule in time to move my body, power walking, running, biking? The medicine can help enable these healthy habits, and then they work in tandem to resolve any mental health issues, whether that's anxiety or depression or whatever. And then finally, it does really build rapport between the therapist and the client. A client can come in and be whoever they want for 50 minutes each week. But during a ketamine experience, there's just something very genuine about it. I'm often seeing a person come to these major realizations that they may not have ever shared to anybody or even themselves. It's amazing privilege. And that's a very bonding experience. Oftentimes, I feel a stronger connection with people after just a few ketamine sessions, just being the therapist, than people that I've worked with for months, sometimes even years. There's just something very bonding about it. After a very good ketamine session, there's just a greater sense of camaraderie and connection and a therapeutic rapport. And that's one of the biggest predictors of therapeutic success. Can you really connect with your therapist? So those are the basic concepts of how the whole process starts. But the next big question, is it scary? The short answer to that is not nearly as much as you would think. When it comes to something like magic mushrooms or psilocybin, it's almost as if you're kind of on a different planet, different universe. It's a 4 to 5 hour experience. If I were to engage in a psilocybin experience, 5 days from now, I would feel a little bit nervous about it, a little bit apprehensive, right? I would trust in the process, but feel a little nervous. I don't get that same sense when it comes to a ketamine session. The ketamine session, it just seems lighter, like you're floating above. It's a dissociative, it's like a dreamlike state, but it just doesn't seem to be as intense. Someone once gave the analogy that doing psilocybin is like taking a scuba trip into the ocean. You're really, really deep. It's an amazing experience. You're very, very deep, and you're going to be there for a while. Ketamine is like snorkeling. You're definitely, you're not dry. You're in the water, but you're just under the surface, right? Sometimes with a ketamine experience, if a person takes off their sleep mask and takes off, their headphones, they're generally back to where they were, right? You can take a nice little break from it. And then when you're ready, put the headphones, put the sleep mask on, and then kind of go under. Whereas psilocybin is 4 or 5 hours, ketamine is 45 minutes and an hour. Psychologically, it just kind of feels better. It's like when you have a worry or a fear of flying across the Pacific versus flying from LA to Vegas. It's 45 minutes, you're up there. You have an experience and then you're back home, okay? So all in all, it seems to be a better match for people who have control issues, for people who get kind of apprehensive. The music has a big influence on the ketamine, so you might have an issue, you might have a struggle, and the music kind of releases a little bit of some sadness, some apprehension. But then there'll be a new music piece, and you might have a sense of optimism, right? You may have a sense of just kind of a different perspective. So just knowing that different musics will give you a different kind of perspective. Having said that, there are going to be some emotions, and part of the process is learning to befriend some of these emotions. Sometimes when you have an experience and you're a bit fearful or you're a bit sad and you breathe into it and you make room for those emotions, what will happen is that in real life, once you encounter those emotions, you're better able to manage them, which means you're better able to avoid those emotions, which is crucial, right? Think of how many relationship problems occur because we're avoiding something, we're avoiding an emotion. Well, part of the ketamine process, part of the psychedelic therapy process is learning to accept that there are certain emotions and you can feel them and allow them to pass. And whatever your substance you're taking, being prepared and having a good connection with your therapist, as well as having good intentions, are going to be very, very important, right? Imagine, again, traveling to a different country. If you come in with an intention and you have a tour guide and you really trust that tour guide, you're going to, venture far out. And if something weird happens, but you have your tour guide there, you're just going to feel a little bit more relaxed, right? So finally, using this travel analogy, taking psilocybin is like traveling to a very exotic country, Bhutan, like you don't know what's going on. Ketamine, it's like traveling to Australia. Okay, it's kind of different. People are driving on the other side of the road. Okay, but you kind of know what's going on, right? You're kind of a little bit more grounded. But again, having a good tour guide, having a good therapist is going to make the experience generally a lot better. And having this intention of growing and learning about yourself, it's going to make all the difference. Fourth question, of course, is it safe? Well, there's a reason you can do it at home. There's a reason that they mail you the ketamine. You don't have to go to a clinic. You're working with a therapist. Oftentimes you're working with a therapist remotely. Studies have shown it to be safe and effective doing it at home in a home setting. As a precaution, before we start, and usually after, we'll check your blood pressure. And that's just because it does elevate blood pressure. If you have a major cardiovascular issue, if you have uncontrolled blood pressure or an issue with glaucoma, you're not going to want to do it if your blood pressure is very, very high. So we check the blood pressure, but genuinely speaking, it appears to be safe, and it appears to not conflict with a lot of psychiatric medication. So you definitely don't want to take something like MDMA if you're taking SSRIs, but that conflict doesn't seem to be there with ketamine. Whatever medication you're taking, you'll talk with the doctor who will prescribe you the ketamine, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of conflicts. And it appears to be pretty safe. So the fifth, final question, how do you get the ketamine? And I'll explain the process in detail in another clip, but generally speaking, we meet, we get information, try and figure out if we would be a good match. Again, you're going to want to have faith and trust in your tour guide, so you're going to want to have that same with your therapist. If it seems like we're a good match, and it seems like you're a good candidate for ketamine, then I will submit your information to a company. That company will reach out to you. You'll schedule a medical evaluation with a doctor, and the doctor will ask you some questions, make sure you're a good candidate, make sure there's no contraindications, make sure that you can do it responsibly. Then they will simply mail you the ketamine, and they'll mail it to you. They'll give you a link to track it. You might have to sign for it, you might not. But then that's basically it. With my company, you'll get 2 doses, and then if that seems something you want to continue, you'll have another medical evaluation, and then you'll get 6 more doses, 8 total. Okay, so those are the basic questions. Any other questions, feel free to post them. But in the meantime, let's explore the other clips to explore psychedelic therapy and the ketamine therapy process. Thank you.